upset the whole balance of nature.
The impact of Hurricane Katrina was very extensive on my family.
I was involved in one of the very first major wildfires in California. 3,000 homes were burned.
Hurricane Sandy spurred me to think more about the climate crisis.
Hey listeners, I'm Colleen DeBase. This is a special two-part podcast from The Story Exchange.
And I'm Sue Williams. We're talking extreme weather events, which are becoming more frequent, more intense, and frankly, more terrifying as a result of climate change.
These deadly events have a profound impact on those who survive. Throughout this podcast, you'll hear from some amazing women who were shaken to the core by a storm or a heat wave or a wildfire, and who are now doing innovative work to save the planet.
We like to think this can provide some hope and optimism in otherwise scary times.
Give it a listen.
I went to Louisiana a lot as a kid.
That's Lisa Dyson.
She's a brilliant scientist who we met with recently, a high-profile entrepreneur who's dedicated her career to working on the climate crisis.
My mother's family is from Louisiana, not in New Orleans proper, but nearby.
She spent happy summers there as a kid.
With all those huge bugs they have down there, and just hanging out with my cousins and picking fruit and going to the creeks and the lakes. It was so fun.
Lisa eventually went to MIT, becoming only the fourth African-American woman to earn a PhD in theoretical high-energy physics.
My thesis was on rotating black holes, cosmology, and time travel.
She had really just earned that degree when this news broke. August 29th, 2005, here's New Orleans Mayor Ray Noggins.
Ladies and gentlemen, this is not a test. There is a major hurricane that is in the Gulf of Mexico.
Hurricane Katrina tore into the Gulf Coast with gusting winds of 175 miles per hour and a storm surge of 26 feet.
For listeners who don't remember Katrina, one of the worst natural disasters in U.S. history, we want to take you back to that time. The storm caused billions of dollars in damages and became one of the first iconic examples of the devastation that climate change wreaks, especially on vulnerable communities. Here's CBS News.
With much of New Orleans now underwater, authorities are focused on search and rescue before it's too late.
New Orleans, a city built under sea level, had been protected by a system of levees, but they were no match for a Category 5 storm.
Katrina sent torrents of water over the levees.
Entire neighborhoods vanished underwater. Here's a 911 call from that time.
The water is steady rising in the attic, ma'am. And I'm drowned in the attic.
Nearly 1,400 people died, hundreds trapped in their own homes.
Many were people of color and people of little means, living in areas with the least amount of protection.
And, as we saw in the days and weeks after the storm, nearly abandoned by local authorities and the federal government. Here's a montage of news reports.
We are gonna die out here if they do not see somebody out here right now.
The horror show at the Superdome. Close to 25,000 people were trapped there for days in the heat and stink.
We have never seen anything like this in the United States of America.
George Bush doesn't care about black people.
It left a scar on the national psyche.
Being there after that had an impact on me in several ways.
That's Lisa Dyson again.
After Katrina, she went back down to Louisiana, the place of so many happy childhood memories.
Her family was okay, but
just seeing the devastation that this weather event created and how it affected everyday people's lives, that had a huge impact. I mean, being a scientist, thinking about climate science, thinking about how climate scientists have been telling us that we're going to have more intense weather events and they're going to be more frequent, more severe, that got me interested in trying to be a part of the solution.
We spent some time recently with Lisa at her startup's headquarters in Oakland, California.
See, I gotta pull focus. Yep, that's good.
Lisa Dyson, take one, Mark.
I am one of the founders of Air Protein and the CEO.
The Financial Times had just named her one of the most influential women of 2023. Her company literally makes protein from thin air.
We started Air Protein really as a way to make food without a footprint. It doesn't require any arable land whatsoever.
Lisa took us on a tour of her lab, which is a full-scale research and production facility.
So here we have where it all begins.
She explained to me that they use fermentation technology to turn simple cultures into nutrient-dense food that's carbon neutral.
And you can grow food with just elements of the air, water, and energy in a matter of hours. So you don't have to wait months or years in the case of a cow, and you don't need to wait for the right season, and et cetera. You can grow food anywhere, anytime, rain or shine, day or night.
Lisa and her co-founder, Dr. John Reed, started Air Protein in 2019 after a decade of research. They were driven by the knowledge that agriculture is a major source of greenhouse gases.
If you didn't know, one of the biggest contributors to climate change is livestock. Cows and sheep emit methane when they belch.
We really looked at the biggest problem and the biggest opportunity, which is alternative meat, replacements for beef, chicken, pork, etc.
During their research, they discovered intriguing work that NASA had started 40 years earlier, proposing unique ways to feed astronauts in space.
So that was an idea in the 60s and 70s, and they put it on the shelf. We picked it up because we have a lot of people that we need to feed, and we need to do it in a way that uses much less land, that does not lead to deforestation, and we needed to do it in a way that doesn't emit as much of this greenhouse gas emissions that we have. And what are the samples of?
It's AP100.
Okay.
Yeah,
okay.
so for...
A team of scientists, perhaps a couple dozen, were working with beakers and glass tubes and machines of all sorts. One of them, Mark Rowland, Air Protein's chief manufacturing officer, swirled some cultures around.
And it really comes down to this culture being the start of the process, going through multiple refining steps.
Just so that I understand, in these little beakers are the microbes to which you add water, hydrogen, oxygen, carbon dioxide, and you mix it all around, and you can make pasta or meat or bread. Is that?
In a nutshell, that's it.
That's really incredible. So you don't need animals and you don't need land.
That's right. It's all done in a lab. And what makes Air Protein different from so many other food alternatives is that they use no animal cultures at all. They're not trying to grow meat or fish.
Just think of all the people. I mean, there's 8 billion people on the planet, and that's a lot of food to get to. And so there's a huge food security benefit to this way of making food, and you can make it in a matter of hours. Okay, the slices look quite nice.
Beautiful crunch.
Yeah, it just tastes like good bread.
It is.
Mm-hmm.
Lisa has raised over $100 million for Air Protein.
There's lots of scientific and engineering challenges that we face along the way, and that's the journey that we're on. If it were easy, it would already be out there and commercialized.
She hopes to see products made with Air Protein on grocery shelves in the next 3 to 5 years. And it's not a moment too soon.
So we're seeing the effects of climate change now. The need to act is only getting more important and more urgent.
When we come back, we'll look at how extreme weather events like a Katrina have gone from once-in-a-century storms to something far more common.
And during our commercial breaks, we'll be sharing memories from activists in the New York City area about the droughts and disasters that pushed them to fight for change. Stick around.
You're listening to the Story Exchange podcast. So was there an aha moment for you that inspired you to get involved in environmental justice?
Yeah, I'm a teacher, and Hurricane Sandy happened my first year in the classroom, and our school closed down for a week. So that was definitely like a moment that spurred me to think more about the climate crisis. We're responding to the science, and we want a safe world for our kids.
Check out more of our climate coverage at thestoryexchange.org.
Welcome back. We're recording this special environmental podcast in the thick of hurricane season.
This year, NOAA, the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration issued its most aggressive hurricane forecast on record.
Let's get right into it.
That's NOAA Chief Scientist Rick Spinrad. He expects as many as 25 named storms this year, and up to 7 major ones.
Now is the time to prepare and stay prepared. Remember, it only takes one storm to devastate a community.
There are a number of reasons for NOAA's warning, including El Niño, La Niña weather patterns, but also human-caused climate change, which is warming our oceans.
That ocean heat causes storms to pick up more moisture, resulting in stronger winds, heavier rains, and record flooding when these storms do make landfall.
As we saw with Hurricane Katrina, the destruction left behind when these big storms hit can last for years, if not decades.
And extreme weather has a profound impact on women's lives around the world, pushing millions into poverty and exposing countless others to health issues and even violence.
Yeah, climate change is often called a threat multiplier. Here's Asa Retner of UN Women speaking at the COP26 summit in Glasgow.
Women and girls are both more affected by climate change than men and boys because of the inequalities that already exist between men and women.
Women, especially in developing countries, are often the suppliers of food, water, and fuel, such as firewood, for their families. And all of that becomes harder in cases of drought, flooding, or other severe storms. For example,
we see that women carry water still to a much larger extent than men and are harmed by things that happen on the way to the water when it's getting further and further away from their homes.
One report by the nonprofit Good Governance Africa found that African women and girls in poor communities run the daily risk of rape, beating, and even death when they're forced to go longer and longer distances in search of water.
UN Women has called for, quote, feminist climate justice, and has pushed for more women in leadership roles, especially when it comes to policy making.
All of these issues show that women are affected by climate change, but we also know that women are leaders when it comes to solutions. And we know that when women are decision makers, policies change.
A big area where women around the world are contributing is climate education. And we're going to share now some of our conversation with Bernadette Woods-Placky.
I am Chief Meteorologist at Climate Central.
And what is Climate Central?
Climate Central is a nonprofit, non-advocacy organization really focused on science for communication purposes. We're on the front line of understanding how our climate is changing and doing research to help people understand that and move the conversation forward.
Bernadette is a leader in an area called attribution science,
where we can go into individual weather events and tease out the role of climate change within those events.
Okay. So if a storm hits, you can say exactly how much of that storm is attributed to climate change?
Exactly.
That's quite a change from when Katrina hit.
That's right. Back then, we were just starting to speak generally about how climate was affecting weather patterns, but we really didn't have the ability to say how it was impacting an individual storm like Katrina. But in the past 20 years, that's changed.
As we've advanced our knowledge of the science, as we've advanced our technology and our computing capacity to put way more equations into a system and spin out a lot of information much more quickly, and as our data sets have gotten longer, we've been able to put all of this together.
By the way, the thinking now is that climate change did, of course, impact Katrina.
There's likely a connection with the water temperatures and how it led to that explosive nature of the storm.
But we simply didn't have the data that we have now to be able to concretely show that.
Today, the data sets also include any number of extreme weather events we've had in recent years.
Hurricane Harvey was one of those.
That hit Texas in 2017.
There were multiple attribution studies that came out around Harvey, but overwhelmingly, climate change made that wetter and stronger.
Another big one was
the Pacific Northwest heat wave.
That was a heat wave that broke numerous records in 2021.
There was language that came out that it was virtually impossible without all of the carbon dioxide that we put into the atmosphere, hundreds plus times more intense and more likely.
The idea here is that data and hard science can show the impact of climate change and cut through the politics and the opinions of those that may believe it's all a hoax.
Yeah, I asked Bernadette about that.
Are you trying to be sort of the voice of reason when there's skeptics and doubters?
Absolutely. We really focus on the science because the science is what grounds this conversation.
The good news, she says, is that research has shown that most people, yes, even those living in political red states, believe that climate change is indeed happening. Where things break down is that people don't necessarily believe that things like, say, the burning of fossil fuels is causing it.
Where you see those numbers drop off is human causation, what the full causes are, and what they can do about it. But the group that's going to challenge conversation and has made it a political issue and really probably won't move opinions on it is only about 10% of the population.
That's such a small percentage. Well, we'll touch on the politics of it all in our next episode.
Yeah. Meanwhile, Climate Central and other groups like the woman-led World Weather Attribution based in the UK are using all this data to better understand climate and extreme weather.
We see what a storm is going to do. And even though there is excitement and energy around the sheer storm itself, because meteorologists are pretty much all geeks about weather, we see what it's going to do to people. We know what that looks like before it happens.
Those predictions will hopefully prompt communities and countries to take action to keep people safe.
From what impact that will have, the flooding it will create, the wind damage, the people that it will displace. Climate change is not only changing our weather, making it more extreme, but affecting so many of the things we love and the communities and the people that we love, from our water to our food systems to where we live to how we go about our daily lives. And so we're seeing that on much bigger scales.
We'll be right back.
You're listening to the Story Exchange podcast. Was there an extreme weather event that really was like your aha moment and got you involved in climate activism?
I have one son who lives in France, and we went hiking together in the Alps. And you could just see these empty craters where there weren't any more glaciers, and then you get to the edge of a glacier that was dripping away. Mm-hmm. So that made a big impression on me.
Check out more of our climate coverage at thestoryexchange.org.
Welcome back. We mentioned at the top of this podcast that if there is any silver lining to the extreme weather events that haunt us, it's that they've made us take action.
The storms, the droughts, the epic heat waves, they've truly motivated innovators in the climate space.
Every year we have, I guess you could call it a competition, where we ask women scientists to tell us about projects they're working on.
It's our Women in Science Incentive Prize.
And we've heard time and time again about how witnessing or experiencing an extreme weather event, often at an early age, completely shaped these women's lives and impacted their career choices.
And perhaps no surprise, the storm that we tend to hear the most about among U.S. scientists is the big one we mentioned earlier.
The impact of Hurricane Katrina was very extensive on my family.
That's Brittany Kendrick, a civil engineer.
We lost my grandparents' home, which is located in the lower 9th Ward.
She says her full circle moment came
when I graduated out of college and I started working for the Army Corps of Engineers because of the levee breaking.
Today, Brittany is the co-founder of Hydronomy, a startup that uses solar power to capture moisture from the sky with the goal of providing drinkable water to vulnerable populations.
And speaking of water, here's Paige Peters, a scientist in Wisconsin. Back in 2006,
I traveled with a group for our local Marquette chapter of Engineers Without Borders to Mississippi to do Katrina relief work.
She witnessed firsthand the destruction.
There was a spot very close to where we were working where you could stand on the coast and look back to the tree line, and you could see how for half a mile or so, the trees were just bent incredibly by this wall of water that had come during the hurricane.
Today, Paige's startup is called Rapid Radicals, and she's come up with a way for cities to quickly treat wastewater during storm events.
It made me realize what we could do as engineers, the effects that we could have, the devastation of Mother Nature.
And then there's Lisa Dyson, who we told you about earlier, and whose startup, Air Protein, we toured in Oakland. She's still driven not just by Katrina, but everything we're experiencing nearly 2 decades later.
The weather impacts that we're seeing, from Canada having its worst wildfire season on record, to the floods in Libya, to severe heat waves in South America. These things are impacting people's lives, and so we have to act.
But are we acting enough?
And are we running out of time?
There are reasons to be optimistic.
We are going through an energy and a transportation revolution right now.
That's Bernadette Woods-Placky again of Climate Central.
It's happening as we're speaking. So these two things are happening at once. We have to speed up the solutions and slow down the warming. And we can do that. It's really up to us. That's the thing, is we know what's causing all of this. We know what's changing our climate. And we know that we have the capacity to create that change. Our future really isn't determined yet.
But many people are frustrated at how long it's taking and how big business and governments are ignoring the warning signs.
My name is Marlena Fontes of Climate Families NYC. We've all grown up on stories of the civil rights movement and other movements where activists have taken that step of being arrested, and it's a necessary tool that we need to wield.
In our next episode, we'll hear from the activists, the protesters, the marchers, the ordinary citizens who care, Jane Fonda.
We have to fight, and if enough of us fight, we're going to win.
Join us next time.
This has been a special report from The Story Exchange. Our nonprofit media platform aims to elevate women's voices. If you like this podcast, please share on social media or post a review wherever you listen. It helps other people find the show. And visit our website at thestoryexchange.org, where you'll find news, videos, and tips for entrepreneurial women. And we'd love to hear from you. Drop us a line at info@thestoryexchange.org or find us on Facebook, Instagram, or LinkedIn. I'm Colleen DeBase. Sound editing provided by Nusha Balian. Interview recorded by Anton Herbert. Additional reporting by Claretta Bellamy. Production coordinator is Noelle Flago. Our mixer is Pat Donahue. Executive producers are Sue Williams and Victoria Wong. Recorded at Cutting Room Studios in New York City.